This Day in Sports History. And welcome back to another edition of This Day in Sports History. It is February 10th, and on this day we had women on skates making Olympic history, a barrier-shattering performance on the track, and one of the greatest wins in U.S. men's soccer history. Those stories plus an unbelievable yet completely true non-sports fun fact at the end about the fight for survival and one man's ingenuity. I'll get started right after this. Hey, real quick, you've heard me talk a lot about the Sterling Soap Company over the past few months, and if you haven't tried out their soaps, I get it. It's not easy changing up your routine. But let me just say, if you give them a try, I'm nearly 100% certain you will have zero regrets. They carry not only bar soap, but shave soap, liquid body soap, body lotions, beard balm, lip balm, and a lot more. Plus, there are myriad scents to choose from. Their products are made with natural ingredients and scented oils, and they are committed to being environmentally conscious. And I always get a handwritten note on my packing slip, so I know it's been checked before shipping, and it's a nice little human touch in a world that seems to be going away from that. Give Sterling Soap a try today at sterlingsoap.com. Well, with the Winter Olympics underway in Italy, let's take a step back to 1968, when American Peggy Fleming won gold in figure skating in Grenoble, France. Now, this was big for a couple of reasons. First, 7 years prior, nearly the entire U.S. figure skating team, both men and women, were killed in a plane crash on their way to the World Figure Skating Championships in Czechoslovakia. Fleming was just 12 at the time of the plane crash and had not been scheduled to travel, but her coach at the time, William Kipp, was on that flight and died along with 18 athletes and 15 other coaches, staff, and family members. The U.S. had dominated the sport for the past decade, winning 2 golds and 3 bronze medals in the 1960 Winter Games. The team managed to win only a couple of bronze medals in the '64 Olympics, and the program was still rebuilding as the team went to France in the winter of 1968. Fleming took the ice on this day, wearing a Chartreuse outfit that paid homage to the Carthusians who had been embedded in that part of the world since the 11th century. The word for the bright green color comes from the Carthusians. You get a lot more than sports here on this podcast. Well, the outfit may have endeared her to the French judge, but her skating made her the favorite of all the judges. She dominated the compulsory round and then brought an artistic component to the routine that seemed to be missing at that point in women's figure skating, and she won gold easily, 88 points ahead of East Germany's Gabriele Seifert. Now, her gold medal she won on this day was the only gold the U.S. won at the 1968 Winter Olympics. Not only did her win invigorate the U.S. skating program, but it increased fan support for the Winter Olympics in general and women's figure skating more specifically. How about another woman on skates that won gold on this day in 1992? Bonnie Blair was not only the defending champion of the women's 500-meter speed skating Olympic competition, but she was also the world record holder coming into the '92 Olympics in Albertville, France. But she was not overly confident that she could do it again. She was pretty certain that another world record was out of the question, with the speed skating venue being outside, but she wasn't even sure she'd be on the podium when the dust settled, fearing the East German contingent. But Blair clocked a time of 40.33 seconds to take gold over China's Ye Xiaobo by 0.18 of a second. Now, Xiaobo lodged a protest claiming that she was interfered with on the crossover during her race, but the protest was denied and Blair retained her gold medal. Blair became the first woman to win back-to-back gold medals in the 500-meter event at the Olympics. Let's keep the theme of going fast in circles with what happened on this day in 1962 when another 4-minute barrier was cracked. So most folks know that British runner Roger Bannister recorded the first sub-4-minute mile in May of 1954. It was a human feat that for the longest time the majority of people that had ever lived on this planet thought was unobtainable. But once the barrier was broken, several people stepped through that void. Now, of course, Bannister's record was outside, and it's interesting that it took nearly an additional 8 years before the feat of a sub-4-minute mile could be duplicated indoors. And the man who crashed through it has been mostly lost to history, except in the most niche of running circles. So on this day in 1962, at the Los Angeles Sports Arena, American Jim Beatty became the first person in the world to run a sub-4-minute mile indoors. Beatty, a North Carolina native, had been a distance man in the 1960 Olympics in Rome, running the 5,000-meter. Well, on this night, a full house of 13,000 were in the seats to hopefully watch history being made as Beatty suited up for the LA Track Club, running with 3 LATC runners with the intent on assaulting the indoor mile record. Jim McKay and ABC Sports broadcast this event live. The gun to start the race fired at 10:15 that night, and it would be over before it hit 10:19. The group ran the first quarter in 59.1, with Beatty getting paced by his teammates. Coming to the bell lap, the chance for the first sub-4 indoor mile was evident.
Saying track history right here and now. He still has about 40 yards to go.
He's going to make it. He's going to run the first 4-minute mile.
It looks like he made it unofficially. 3:58.6. What did you get, Dick?
According to my watch, 3:59 flat. No doubt about it. Jim Beatty has just run the first 4-minute mile indoor history.
There you see him, Jim Beatty. Tired, weary, but oh so happy.
The official time would go down as 3 minutes 58.9 seconds, and Jim Beatty had become the first person to run a sub-4 mile indoors. Beatty became known as Mr. Indoor, with Bannister Mr. Outdoor. Reflecting on this feat 60 years later, Beatty said, being the very first to accomplish something special, well, that can never be taken away. It is everlasting. On to the NBA now. And how about 2 incredible scoring performances on this night in not only different years, but completely different eras? Now, if I mentioned that this was a Philadelphia player that scored a bunch in a different era, I would guess that your first thought would be, this is another Wilt Chamberlain scores a bunch of points story. And in this case, well, you'd be wrong. Before Wilt, Philly had Jumpin Joe Fulks, and on this night in 1949, Joe went for 63. Now, these are the early days of the NBA, and in fact, it was still known as the BAA at this point. This is also a time when there was no shot clock to incentivize teams to shoot the ball, which makes what Joe did on this night even more amazing. Now, if you are not familiar with the name Joe Fulks, then you should know that he's considered one of the developers of the jump shot. If you look at old footage from the 40s, guys were shooting two-handed set shots. Joe had the ability to shoot with either his right or his left hand, making him a much more dynamic scorer. He led the league in scoring in both 47 and 48, and during this season he averaged a career-best 26 a game, but finished second to George Mikan in scoring. On this night, Joe's Warriors were playing the Indianapolis Jets, and he was a one-man wrecking crew, and he set a couple of records. He had 27 of 56 shots from the floor, added 9 free throws to score his 63. His 33 points in the first 2 quarters set the record for most points in a half, and his 63 bested the previous mark of 48 set by Mikan. And in 2012, Linsanity went into the stratosphere. The Knicks were playing the Lakers at MSG, and Jeremy Lin had himself a game. In the run-up to this one, Kobe had been asked by the media what he thought of Jeremy and this whole Linsanity craze that was going on. Well, Kobe said he had no idea what they were talking about. On this night, Kobe found out.
Lin puts it up, puts it in! Jeremy Lin off to a terrific start. Lin with 5 assists. Tough turnaround shot, gets to the go. Lin likes the open floor, spinning, puts it up and banks it in. Sensational Well play for Jeremy Lin. And the Spartan crowd on its feet again. Shumpert out to Lin. Lin fakes, pull-up jump shot. Knocks it down. Crowd wants him, puts up the two-pointer, puts it in. Jeremy Lin with 31. Jeffries another rebound. Lin for three. Bang!
Lin dropped 38 in a 92-85 win against Kobe and the Lakers. Of course, those two would wind up as teammates 3 years later in what would be a very tumultuous year for the Lakers, the beginning of which started on this night in 2012. On this day in 1998, the U.S. men's national soccer team pulled off one of the unlikeliest upsets. This was a Concacaf Gold Cup semifinal match between the U.S. men and Brazil. Now, Brazil is a member of a different football federation, but they had been invited to play in this tournament, and it was an interesting choice since they were number one in the world and they were the defending World Cup champs, gearing up to defend that title a few months later in France. Any way you looked at this match before the first whistle, it shaped up to be a Brazilian rout, and not many in the U.S. even cared about it. There were only 12,000 in the LA Coliseum to watch it. Now, by contrast, more than 45,000 were on hand to watch the other semifinal match between Mexico and Jamaica. And in fact, the way the first half played, it looked like only a matter of time before the Brazilians scored. They were peppering U.S. keeper Casey Keller.
It might be tough for them. Here's the long shot at Mundo. And Keller makes the stop. Look out, opportunity. They play it outside. Manuel in the area. Manuel, the shot blocked in front. The shot blocked at the 6-yard box. And another shot. And Casey Keller just getting a piece of it. The cross in front. The header, the save. Oh, a diving save by Casey Keller. And again, robbing Romario.
Keller was the repeller because he blocked every shot that was fired at him. Brazil's Romario was so impressed after one point-blank shot that Keller stopped, he walked over and he shook his hand, and it was 0-0 at half. 2 decades later, Keller remembered the feeling of that night.
You make a couple saves early and you think, okay, that's kind of settling, and then you make a couple more saves and a couple more saves, and then it's 0-0 at halftime, and you think, wow, you still didn't really think you had a chance. You still just kind of thought that, wow, we're kind of staying in this thing.
In the second half, the U.S. team was content to play conservatively, not take too many risks, and look for an opportunity or two to counterattack. They broke the seal on the goal, though, in the 65th minute with a guy who just checked into the game.
Wijnaldum. There's Precki on his left foot. The shot, the goal! In the 65th minute, gives the USA a 1-goal advantage.
The super sub, Precki, gave the U.S. a 1-0 lead. But with 25 minutes and added time left, the Brazilians increased the pressure they had been applying the entire game to Keller. The U.S. did not break, though. Keller continued to build a brick wall behind him and ended up with 10 saves and a clean sheet in the 1-0 win to advance to the finals. Years later, Precki recalled the feeling after that game.
I remember after the game, it was hard to describe because you just beaten Brazil. After all those moments they had, and obviously Casey put us in that position that make the moment like I had and ended up being a winner. So it was a great moment. It's always going to be there.
And this story may not be so surprising now that we get beat continuously over the head about artificial intelligence, but on this day in 1996, IBM's Deep Blue defeated a chess champion for the first time, taking down the current world champ at that point, Garry Kasparov. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. In 1993, Frenchman Émile Loray was driving deep into the Sahara Desert when his Citroën 2CV broke down. All alone in the middle of the Sahara and sure to perish if he tried to walk, he disassembled the car, built a motorcycle from the usable parts and he rode to safety. Now, when he figured out his plan, he thought he had about 10 days of water remaining and figured it would take 3 days to turn the car into a motorcycle. Instead, it took him 12. He did make it back to safety, but just barely. And to make the story a little more interesting, shortly before his journey was finished, he was pulled over by a policeman for driving an illegal vehicle. That's all I've got for you today. Come on back tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.